presentation been moved from this computer to that computer?
No, but we can if we need
Might
to.
as well, that way when we get ready, we can keep it moving.
Okay. It should show from either one, but we can do it from that one if you want.
It doesn't matter, we don't care.
Okay.
And where is there?
It's ready loaded on here.
Is there a clicker?
Is there a clicker?
So, I guess
there a
the other
clicker?
issue was because the other one was in executive session.
Okay.
It couldn't show because I had it over there, so I guess you're fine.
No,
There is no clicker? Okay, so I can just tell somebody to advance it for me? Would one of y'all do it for me?
we will.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
Zoom session on HDMI 2, which is the laptop, I'm just seeing the blue background. Yeah, blue background. All I'm seeing is the blue background instead of the Zoom meeting. It's got that Zoom meeting still running. No, it's on the it's on the laptop, but
Hey, Dan. I'm going to turn this on. Because that's supposed to be this over now.
yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. Alright, so, I got the Zoom back, I got the main camera, I got the podium, I got the USB camera, so, and we're streaming. Yeah, I believe so. It's no, I think the other gentleman will go first. He actually did a little project for me. He's actually going to, I think he's going to do it again. Yeah, we do. You should be able to throw this PowerPoint presentation on the screen.
Should be. From the share, yeah. Screen share.
He said we weren't going to have to do that or whatever. That gentleman agrees. If he still
To share it from here?
yeah. If he wants it, we can do it. If he doesn't, then. No. Justin? This gentleman here. This gentleman. The other table. Yeah. Yeah. No, we don't want it, so I think we're good. I think we're
Specify.
I'm sorry. I thought I pointed it, but I guess he's putting it. So I guess we're good. Yeah. All right. Thanks. All right. Bye.
I don't know who that was. No, you can. Oh. Who? Yes, it is. Yeah, that's the attorney. Yeah. It's cool. All right. Did you? That wasn't Kyle, was it? Okay. He said it was no the sound on the YOLO.
Oh, that's because.
Is it not?
So what she's getting.
And when you do something.
Yeah, we're good.
That's going to be a big loss.
Thanks for sticking around for this. I know everybody's probably ready to get on the road.
I think my chair.
I wanted to just give a little background before I introduce our guests. First off, we did celebrate 2 of our best years ever. The theme of our annual meeting was sort of economic development. It's not an event, it's a process. And it doesn't come about by accident. The reason it happened was because county council had the foresight to create our office and really focus, emphasize economic development, made big investments, courageous, brave moves, and that led to the success. 2 years ago, council members asked for a larger strategic plan, something more overarching. And in response to that, we did an RFI. We ended up hiring a firm out of Austin, Texas called TIP Strategies. Ironically, we called Charleston County. They had just used this, gave them reference. Before we were through the project, they said, we're bidding on a strategic plan for Greenville County. So they asked us to provide a reference to Greenville County. So they've done all 3 of the major counties in South Carolina. They made several recommendations. One of those was to consider a different structure, a public-private partnership. We have done a little homework and looked at it. We wanted to kind of float this idea with you today. Joining us today, we have Mark Farris. He is the CEO of the Greenville Area Development Corporation, Greenville's model of public-private. Butch Curvin is a longtime county council member here in Greenville County and a longtime chair. And he was the chair when they created that organization. So without further ado, I want to thank you for agreeing to speak to you today, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, sounds good, Jeff. You'll go first?
Yeah, Butch, if you don't mind, I just have a small presentation. Hey, everybody, welcome to Greenville. I'm gonna take this off if y'all don't mind. I'm not good at that through there, but glad y'all are here. We certainly love to see visitors. I think every year Greenville has about a dozen or so communities that come and try to get some information. We do the same. We've been to Austin and Columbus and some other cities on behalf of the chamber, certainly, and so there's always a lot to learn. It seems like when you're out and about, and so we really appreciate y'all coming in. I want this to be informal. Certainly, I want you to ask any questions you have. Jeff and I have talked a little bit about it, but what I thought I would do is go through and talk about our program of work. I've only been with the organization for about 7 years. Butch, on the other hand, helped create it and has been on council for decades. And so he has some historical and certainly some insight into the organization, the background, the formation, the kind of the politics maybe that were behind it. I'm the grunt. I'm the one who kind of establishes the policy, or not establishes the policy, but implements the policy. As Jeff mentioned, we're in the process of doing our new strategic plan as well. There's been a lot of changes in economic development. I've been in the business 35 years. I spent most of my career in York County, South Carolina. In fact, I had 27 years there. And when the job came over here, there were very few places that I would consider coming, but Greenville was always an icon for me. I used to read press announcements and see Mr. Curvin's name in the press announcements welcoming the companies that I had just lost in York County to Greenville. So my sons were fortunate enough to get into Clemson, and my wife actually works for an engineering company and can do her job from really anywhere. But we decided that this was going to be the only place in South Carolina we might want to go otherwise. And it's been a great move for us, my family and myself. I'm impressed with Greenville County on a couple counts. Number one is the fact that they've made the commitment to resources in economic development especially, but it's a very cooperative environment certainly, and that makes my job a lot easier when I have all the municipalities in the county working together towards accomplishing our goals. But anyway, let me go through this presentation. Like I said, if you have, yeah, that's great. That's great. So the first slide, we start every presentation. We have a group of investors. We have about 120 folks that give us some funding that we use exclusively for marketing. And so we do events. We do 5 or so a year. COVID has kind of put the kibosh on that a little bit, but we have our events and we go into presentations and we talk about our mission. We never miss a chance to talk about our mission because we don't want to ever stray from that. But our job at the end of the day is to recruit manufacturing, distribution, and office projects to Greenville County, and with the intent of raising the per capita income of every citizen in Greenville County. So, but this is our official mission, and we take it seriously, and we try to remember it every time. So, what do? Well, under our core competencies on the next slide, we talk about the project management. So obviously, when the Department of Commerce or a consultant or a company even reaches out to us, we're the group that
Record in progress.
we're the group that boots on the ground. We work with the companies to find them sites or buildings, much like Jeff does. Certainly, we're a similar kind of organization, obviously, but incentive negotiation is huge, and I think Mr. Kirby might talk a little bit more about that and maybe the impetus for our organization of our GADC and the 501c3 group that we are. But that is a huge responsibility. We'll talk a little bit more about that in this presentation as well. But project cooperation, we tend to get a lot of credit for deals, but it actually takes a ton of people to get a company to either locate or expand in Greenville. We have some really tremendous partners and allies, and every opportunity I always try to give them credit and let people know that it just wasn't us. The county council certainly supports us tremendously, but we also, like I say, we have those investor groups that help us win projects as well. So we went to Richmond County on the next slide. We went to the USC Darla Moore School. We are celebrating our 20th anniversary. Well, actually, last year was our 20th anniversary. We just we were formed in 2001. But we reached out to Joy Von Nessen, and Joy did a study about the impact that our organization has had on Greenville County. And we felt like it would be a good opportunity to look back and to try to assess the kind of impact and activity that our organization has had on the community. And we found that 64,000 in employment in those categories have been impacted or been assisted by GADC. Now, that's not obviously the whole workforce, but that is 1 out of every 4 jobs in Greenville County. GADC has helped generate that kind of direct and indirect impact in terms of employment in the county. Annually, the total economic impact over $6 billion a year. So if you talk about the jobs, the salaries, the property taxes certainly that have been generated, the total economic impact annually is over $6 billion a year for those companies that we help recruit to Greenville County, and certainly helps a number of people. On the next slide, I just wanted to talk about 2020, despite COVID, and despite a lot of the challenges that we experienced in the last couple of years, 2020 was a record year for us with over $630 million in new investment and over 1,400 new jobs. The capital investment number surpassed the prior record by about $150 million. So we just, and like I say, it seemed like it came together all at once when we had existing industries like Michelin and Fitessa, and some of these others that are listed up here, but we also had our first Tier 3 data center, DC Blocks. They located in Greenville last year. They just completed construction on their new facility. Had some really big hits, but mostly our industries tend to be smaller investments, 10, 20 million, a couple hundred jobs maybe, but the 2020 was a great year for us. 2021 on the next slide, just to review this year, we had significantly less in capital investment, $23 million. 1,800 new jobs. So we had over 400 new jobs more created this year, more than last. The thing I'm really proud about is the average salary. You know, as we talk about in our mission, our job is to increase the per capita income of the citizens, and that $28.64 average job hourly job rate is about 11% higher than in years past. So we're really excited about the fact that certainly we're getting a significant amount of investment in new jobs, but those jobs are paying a higher wage. And some of the metrics that every organization, I'm sure, you know, Jeff does it as well, but every organization needs to look at metrics. And on the next slide, here's some select metrics for you. So for 2021, we had over 110 contacts. We won 21 projects, which is a pretty good hit ratio, by the way. Industry average is about 10% in terms of wins versus contacts. Again, that investment in new jobs. But the annual economic impact of that 142 million in those 1,800 jobs is over 91 million. So that's a pretty good return on investment. In fact, for every dollar that we negotiated away in property tax revenue, $17 were returned to the community as an impact of that company. So that's a pretty good ROI. That's a metric that we use to measure our success and the impact that we're having. So a lot of times I'm free and I'm available. So I speak to a lot of Rotary clubs and that kind of thing, and I enjoy doing it. But one of the first questions I ask is, well, you know, what kind of companies do you see? Well, Greenville is a manufacturing community. Started back, you know, in industrialization, the late 1800s. We had the Reedy, the Saluda, the NRE. We had a lot of rivers that flew through Greenville, and it created an opportunity for water-powered mills for the textile industry, and so they flocked along the banks of these rivers, and that kind of established our manufacturing base, and certainly that has extended well beyond textile manufacturing. Some of our targeted industries. Next slide. I'm sorry. Some of our targeted industries are aviation, advanced materials, automotive, certainly. Thanks to the great gift in Greer, we're seeing a significant continued amount of investment in new automotive. And of course, the automotive is shifting towards mobility. Just last week, we had one of our announcements, a company called Kosvine. They're a German company, but they're more IT than they are automotive, although they're in the automotive arena. But manufacturing is our bailiwick. We value add. That's what we do well, and we embrace that. In fact, having said that, we're seeing a significant amount of new office. 10 years ago, that number, 16%, would have been less than 10%. Transcom was one of our larger announcements most recently. Corporate headquarters for a company based in Sweden. They do customer service. They're hiring about 400 people. Really excited about the office environment because that signals some diversification. Manufacturing is great. We embrace it, but we also know what happened with the textile industry in the 60s and 70s. We want to avoid that by being more diverse. We don't see a lot of warehouse and distribution because we don't have a lot of cheap land and cheap labor, which kind of they gravitate towards. But having said that, we do have a significant kind of interest in that area. We're an international location. When I was interviewing for the job here, I brought my whole family in, and we walked down the streets of Greenville, and my oldest son, who was in Clemson at the time, overheard somebody speaking Russian, and the only reason he knew that is he had a roommate who was Russian. And while we were at dinner, we heard Japanese and I think some French. So Greenville is an international community, and that can be attributed to leaders like Butch, who years ago, as the textile industry began to wane, certainly we had a lot of textile production, a lot of cloth being woven, a lot of cloth being dyed and finished, a lot of production in the cloth. But this community, after World War II, they decided they wanted to attract the textile machine manufacturers. And where were they? They were Western Europe. They were Switzerland, Italy, Germany. And so they pursued these companies. Greenville back in the 60s, had the largest textile show in the world in Greenville. A lot of people have forgotten that, didn't know that. But when BMW came knocking, it certainly was a lot easier for them to embrace this area because of that path that had been blazed by those companies in Western Europe. I have a lot of Asian companies as well. We're real proud of that, but we are an international community, and certainly we embrace that. On the next slide, I will talk about property taxes. Of course, you know, you're involved in fee in lieu of tax and the negotiations and trying to get industries and businesses to come. One of the things that when I talk to groups, I always bring this slide up because I want them to understand what a competitive disadvantage we could be without fee in lieu of tax. But according to the Lincoln Institute, some of you may have seen this study before, but it's done annually. South Carolina has one of the lowest property tax rates in the nation on owner-occupied housing, right? Because of Act 388, because of the 4% assessment, a lot of reasons, but we have, for homes that we own, it is almost the lowest in the nation. On the other hand, for manufacturing industry, at a 10.5% assessment, normally we have the absolute highest. Lincoln Institute used to use Richland County and Columbia. Now they use North Charleston or Charleston, I think, in this assessment, but we are still, based on that 10.5% rate, have the highest property tax on industrial and personal property taxes for industries in the nation. So on the next example, on the next slide, I just show you what we're competing against. Mecklenburg County, if you take a $10 million investment and look at Mecklenburg or in Mecklenburg, North Carolina, or in Lowndes County, Valdosta, Georgia, a $10 million manufacturer without incentives. Keep in mind, both states offer incentives, but without incentives, their property tax liability for that $10 million for a manufacturer is about $125,000, $130,000. Okay, so without a fee in lieu of tax, if that same $10 million investment came to the city of Greenville, without a fee, their liability would be $355,000 annually. Okay, so that's how far apart we are from our competing states. Now, even after we negotiate fee in lieu of tax, even after we drop that assessment from 10.5% to 6%, that tax in the city of Greenville is still significantly higher than our competing communities. So that's why we have special source revenue credits. That's why we do additional reductions, just to try to get that to a more reasonable rate. Now, we don't necessarily just win or lose projects based on property taxes, but I've been in this 35 years, and I've never had a company ask me about personal income tax. I've never had a company ask me about sales tax, but everyone said, what the heck is going on with property tax? So it is just an endemic situation. It's something that we've had to deal with, and something certainly that we need to account for as we move forward. But that's why we negotiate fee in lieu of tax. So one of the things that we're struggling with, I'm sure Richland County is as well, is growth. This is a slide that I show my elected officials and others, but less than 10% of Greenville County is zoned industrial, but it generates more than 50% of the property tax. Okay, so having industries and businesses in your community is critical, given that difference between residential and industrial, because we're basically subsidizing residential and we're placing the burden for schools, police, fire, all the public services on industries and businesses because of a higher assessment rate. So we're cognizant of that in Greenville. My organization has been on a tear for the last 5 years, doing things like product development. We have our first new business park in 20 years that's in Greenville. We have 5 speculative buildings that are under construction right now. We're real excited about that because we've been aggressively pursuing that, providing incentives to these developers to build speculative buildings. But this is the reason, because we have to have an ever-increasing amount of industrial and commercial to offset sometimes the burden that's created by that residential development. Some of the great things that's happened in Greenville in the last year, we've got 2 bank corporate headquarters, United Community Bank, Southern First. You probably hadn't seen this, but it's at the intersection of Lawrence Road and I-85 per day development. This is Southern First new corporate headquarters. So we're starting to see, like I say, more and more office projects, more and more corporate headquarters. We're excited about that because that means diversity. On the next slide, company called Epsilon, IT company. Real excited about these folks, 145 new jobs, 2.6 million investment in the kind of jobs that create that higher wage category. IT is a target for us as well, and we're starting to see more and more of that kind of activity, and we're excited about that. We got certainly a stake in the automotive market, but on the next slide we talk about not a autonomous vehicle, but electric vehicle, not a car, mind you, but almost like a souped up golf cart that's in great demand. The Star EV just announced an expansion. This is where the industry is going. We're trying to position Greenville to take advantage of the mobility transition. You know, a car becomes less of an internal combustion engine. It becomes more like an iPhone. And we're trying to position Greenville to take advantage of that transition as it occurs through ACEs. You've heard the term probably ACEs, autonomous, connected, electric, and shared. That's the terminology for the future of mobility. This is on the next slide. This is our new business park, Fox Hill, with Butch's help and some others. We went out across Greenville County and we isolated several parcels of property. We were fortunate enough to be introduced to a gentleman by the name of Frankie Marion. His distant relative in the past is Francis Marion. Some of that might ring a bell to you, but his family's owned this property for quite a while. 170 acres. He had been approached by some residential developers. I'd offered him a pretty good price for his property. This is on the very southern end of Interstate 385 near Fountain Inn. We approached him and asked if he and his family would be interested in working with us instead. They wanted to leave a legacy in Greenville, and so thus the name Fox Hill. After the Frank Swamp Fox, but he and his family agreed to work with us. We began immediately marketing the property, doing due diligence, trying to make sure that it was a suitable use for industrial. We got a call from a broker in Charlotte, gentleman that I work with a great deal in the Charlotte area. He said, "Hey, I've got a group from New Jersey looking to take an investment interest in property in your area. Do you have any sites?" And I said, "Well, as a matter of fact, we do." And so, as Jeff will tell you, it was a godsend because instead of the county going out buying this land and trying to develop it, we had a private developer come in, buy it all, put in the roads, water, and sewer, for which we helped. Certainly, we issued infrastructure credits to help them with that. The company came in, built their first building. It got occupied by a company called Gissing. Gissing is an automotive supplier to BMW. They're in construction with their second building, and they have a very significant opportunity to lease that entire second building, and so they're very pleased with what the park has turned into for them, and certainly they'll continue to grow and develop, and we're excited about that. On the next slide, 5 new spec buildings. We started to offer fee in lieu of tax deals proactively to spec buildings, so that if a developer wanted to come in, build a building, we could give them a fee deal that they could then transfer to a new owner. Given the council's approval, but it has spurred out-of-market developers, Panattoni, Crescent, Betnell. We've had a ton of interest from out-of-market developers to come in and build spec buildings, and they've been very successful at it. We've actually had about 8 buildings built. 3 have already been leased, but this is the building under construction, and product development is a huge issue for us. So, priorities for 2022. I mentioned that product development, it's critical. You know, I guess I've been in the business a long time, and I work with communities, sometimes municipalities who want to go out and form their own economic development group. And I said, yeah, it's fine. I said, you can, but I said, what you shouldn't be putting your money into is product. If you have it, they will find you, especially now, given the supply chain issues, given the shortages of building materials, given the challenges of building a new facility, given the time frame that companies are under a lot of times. They don't have time to build a building. If you have product, you're going to get deals. And so we've been focusing on that. We've got a new area, South Greenville Enterprise Park. Mr. Kirby has helped us with that. Certainly, we had our first new tenant there, a company called Vermeer. Vermeer makes directional boring equipment now. Instead of digging big trenches, this company can run your line underground and under people's property otherwise. And with directional boring, they built a new facility out there. They just opened a couple of months ago. And so we've got that area that we're working on to try to get interest in there, and that's occurring. We're starting to see more and more people interested in that region. Corporate headquarters recruitment, we have over 300,000 square feet of Class A space that's planned in Greenville County. We have to fill that space, so we're focusing on trying to get more and more of that, but we also have a lot of space we need to backfill. So we're trying to figure out how we can be more effective in getting some folks into that Class B space. Talent attraction, COVID created the situation, but in April of 2020, we had 12.4% unemployment in Greenville County. Now we're back down below 3% to 2.6. I think it's actually even lower. So talent attraction, retention of people, getting more people to move to Greenville. That's something that all my peers and all our competing groups are doing to try to the model has been in economic development. Let's go to these trade shows. Let's go to consultants. Let's go to the companies in certain locations and encourage them to come to our community. A lot of my peers have abandoned that strategy. Now they're just looking for people, because if they can get smart people to move to their community, companies will find them. And that's been a strategy that a lot of communities have embraced. And certainly we're trying to do it on a relevant scale. Business retention expansion is not a number that's surprising, I'm sure, to anybody in here, but 70% of the invested dollars that you saw from this year and last year, at least 70% came from existing industries. We created a new existing industry position in Greenville County a couple of years ago. This person, only thing they do is go out and talk to companies that are here, try to encourage them to expand, certainly work with them with any issues that they have. Basically, what we're trying to do is keep our companies from becoming Richland's prospects. So I'm real excited about the progress we made there. We're going to increase activity where that is. A new strategic plan, I mentioned that earlier. Jeff mentioned TIP Strategies is going for us. We're really excited about the direction that's going in. We're going to try to see what our position is going to be as we go to Industry 4.0, Manufacturing 4.0. What role do we play in entrepreneurial activity, innovation? So hopefully we'll help answer some of those questions and get us on the path to the next decade. Some of the trends that are impacting us in Greenville, COVID, obviously I can't make too much about it, but it's, obviously it was a lot worse 2 years ago, but we're learning to live with it. We're learning to deal with it. But it certainly had an impact on supply chain. I had a position that I recently filled, the research manager position. I've got a great candidate for it. But in the process of interviewing a lot of these smart young people, I was shocked not to hear that they were interested in the salary, but they asked me if they needed to come in the office every day. So they were used to remote work. That's something that we're considering, something that I'm trying to get more information on as a model, because I'm not sure that my staff needs to be in the office 8 hours a day. Certainly they can be, seems like, as productive otherwise, but that's a trend that old heads like me are having a hard time embracing. But it is certainly an issue and certainly going to be real going forward. Labor, back to the talent availability, product availability, that's still going to be a focus for us. Again, I think if we can get that, get more opportunities in that area, we're going to see more and more companies. And I'm excited to say that for whatever reason, COVID, federal administrations, whatever reason, we didn't see a lot of European companies a couple of years ago. Now that's back. We're seeing more and more Europeans, more and more Asians. We're excited about that because that's, after all, what Greenville is, an international community. Great. So I think that's it for me. I'll be glad to answer any questions. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thanks so much for coming and sharing. It's good. Can you just briefly share a little bit about kind of your organization structure? Are you a county employee? And how many staff members do you have? Is there a mixture, and what does that look like?
I'll let Mr. Kerwin jump in on that because the
Thank you.
structure and the history is kind of his expertise.
Thank you, Mark, and see if I could get this off without looking off my hearing aids. Challenge. I don't know if anybody else has that challenge. I'm kind of a new hearing aid wearer. Didn't know I need them until a few years ago. A few months ago. I served in the military, and as a young guy, I was around a lot of artillery. I got what they call artillery ears. You know, they tell you to put these earplugs in, but you're not sure they work all the time, and sometimes you can't find them, so you still got to shoot the big guns, and then it takes years. I was a resident of Richland County many years ago. Actually, I lived out at Fort Jackson when I was going through basic training with the Army. And I enjoyed my time there. It was a great community. And I know that Fort Jackson's a big asset to Richland County. I didn't know what to expect this morning. I appreciate the invitation for Mark and me to be here. How many of you are county council members in Richland County? Okay, council members sit up front. Y'all have 9 council members? 11?
Yes, one's attended virtually, and we had one leave early.
We have 12 in Greenville County, which is the most you can have under state law in any county. I think Horry County may have 12. You guys got 11. Most counties are around 9. Some of them, smaller counties, are 7. So 12 is an odd number, but it's a little bit unwieldy at times. Anyway, I heard the question, and we're going to get to that in a moment. But I appreciate Mark's presentation. That was a great rundown from what we do. Actually, I was on the search committee that hired Mark 2 years ago, and we interviewed. We actually got resumes in from well over 100 applicants from many different states. It was a nationwide search, and we narrowed it down and interviewed the top 10 or 5, I can't remember. The top 3 we invited in with their families and all that. But anyway, we found Mark, and it was fortunate that we did because he's shown you what we've accomplished in Greenville County in economic development. As a council member, I'm not an expert at these kind of things, and I'm a part-time politician. Some of us got other things too, even though we know it's a full-time job. As far as the pay in the public goes, it's part-time. But still, we got to have experts like Mark, and we made a great choice when we brought him in, and he's really performed well for us. But now, when I got elected to county council in 2004, there was a lot of controversy around how we're going to do economic development in Greenville County. Mark alluded to that a little bit. This goes back to your question there, I believe. So the home rule counties were delegated the authority to provide incentives for economic development, Mark alluded to, because that commonly known as a fee in lieu of tax for the basic thing, which was a workaround to the state constitution of 1895 that says industry is going to pay 10.5% tax assessment, period. I don't know why they did that then or why they didn't change it between now and then, but it was a workaround. They created the fee in lieu of tax and gave counties the authority to provide these, and those incentives have been embellished a little bit over time, as you know, to actually equalize the playing field so that we could compete with other states that didn't have that restriction and that high amount of taxes on industries and non-owner occupied property. So in the 80s and 90s, Greenville County started growing and thinking about economic development, and the county council, we didn't have people like Mark, we didn't have GADC, but we had a Greenville Chamber of Commerce. And the chamber was very active in Greenville. As Mark had said, we had all the textile industries, and all those executives were supportive of the chamber. Pretty powerful organization. And they said, well, I'll tell you what, we'll contract with the county, and we'll get these companies to come here, and we'll give them the incentives, and all the county council has to do is give the rubber stamp, and we'll continue to grow like we always have. That eventually led to some controversy and conflict on who gets first crack at these industries for providing their other local services. And suppose you in a business that you can find out who they are. You can go to them and say, my business wants to support your business. I've been in Greenville a long time. I'm going to vote for you to get these incentives. In the meantime, here's some business I want you to do with my company. Pay to play. That was the problem that we heard about. So in about 2001 or two, was it? County Council summoned up all of its nerve and said, we're going to create GADC and we're going to do away with this contract with the Greenville Chamber. Well, that created a big uproar in the community. You know how politics are, people winners and losers, and everybody gets mad that depending on what side they're on. You can't do this, County Council. This is disrupt. It's going to capsize the boat. We've got a good thing going here, but County Council forged ahead with it. And when I got elected in 2004, the controversy was still raging on. So there was a lot of thought. Matter of fact, that year we turned over County Council. Actually, 3 new members were elected. It tilted the balance of power, if you will. Matter of fact, I was elected chairman on the first meeting I attended after being sworn in 2005. So this landed on my plate. So they said, all right, you're an ex officio member of GADC. I am? Okay. When do we meet? Well, they're going to meet next Tuesday. Okay, so I go over there to the GADC meeting, and these newly appointed board members of GADC and looking at me like, are you going to send us back to the chamber or what's going to happen? I said, GADC is a good organization. We got a good future. We're going to grow like we are. We're going to get along with the chamber. We're going to mend the fences, and we're going to do better than we ever have before. And everybody said, whoosh. And so that's kind of what we did. Everybody kind of came together as a team. And over time, we realized that economic development is a community-wide responsibility. So we mended fences with the chamber. The chamber changed a few personnel that they had over there. And we had changed a few county council personnel. And we realized that we worked better together than we did apart. So we solved that issue because the chambers bring a lot to the table that actually GADC doesn't do. It's a very complementary situation. You know, the chambers can go down to Columbia today, registered lobbyists and all that. GADC is not a registered lobbyist, but if the chamber knows what our priorities are, then they could sort of represent GADC and the county's economic interest in influencing the state legislation down there. And then we had to develop relationships with our regional economic development partners. Upstate South Carolina Alliance was created. You know, all the states covered by different alliances. I'm not sure which the one in Richland County is, but they do a great job of marketing our areas to the globe, to the world market. And just get us on the radar screen. Show us what the advantages are in South Carolina and in the Midlands and in the Upstate. And then the companies say, well, let me find out a little bit more about it. And it narrows down to somebody makes contact with GADC. And you got the chambers, so you got the Upstate Alliance, and then you got the municipal economic development. The city of Greenville's got a pretty robust economic development department that works hand in hand with GADC. And our smaller communities as well are getting involved in. Actually, GADC, being a county organization, supports our local small municipalities that don't have the capabilities for their own staff in economic development. So GADC has developed into a model where we got a board of directors, about 15, I think, on there. They're appointed by county council, and some county council members serve as an ex officio capacity while they're in office, and they work on things like the strategic plan that Mark was talking about, guide and direct. What are our priorities? What are changes coming about? What do we want to do about employment? How are we going to increase the wage levels of citizens in Greenville County? What is the dynamic between the types of industries we want to recruit? Our clusters of industries, how do we balance that against the infrastructure needs of our residential communities? All these come into play through this board and our staff on our strategic planning process, and which is an ongoing process. Eisenhower said plans are nothing but planning is everything. So planning is a continual process. You never get a plan that you put a stamp on and say, throw it on the bookshelf, and when the situation comes up, we'll grab it off and see what to do. It doesn't work that way, but the process of planning is very valuable, and it's an ongoing process. So Mark has a team of project managers, and you also have a research office over there. So their job is to tailor a program for each individual industry that wants to come into Greenville County to meet with them, find out what their challenges are, what their needs, what they're looking for from sites, from utilities, from taxes, from incentives. All of these things come into play, and these project managers are really experts in their field, and they develop a relationship with their site developers and the people representing the companies and the company people themselves, tailoring a plan that meets the specific needs for that industry to enable them to say, yes, we're coming into Greenville County, and it's going to be a good marriage, and everybody's going to make a lot of money and a lot of prosperity to help a lot of people improve their lot in life. So that's what GADC does. Now, you have to decide, I don't know really how you're organized in Richland County to meet the challenges of economic development, but there are a lot of questions that go into it, and I think that the model that we have developed in Greenville County enables us to do it about as well as it can be done. I know some counties have their in-house economic development arm. They got a paid staff that works on it every day. It's a department of the county, just like your recreation department or public works department. You got economic development department. That may be the best model for whatever counties do that. I don't know that y'all do that or not. But the Greenville County, the hybrid model, I call it, where we blend in the nonprofit corporation, which GADC is, supported by the county, and then we have the community-wide members to help create policy and guidance and reflect the needs of the community. And then we have an investor category that want to be investors in GADC from the private sector. These are companies that are in Greenville County and benefit by being here, and they want to support GADC and have some input and information on what's going on with future development. But the investors pay dues to GADC that are set aside. They're not part of the operating budget. The county provides all the operations, salaries, pay the rent for the office building and everything like that. But the investor money is only used for marketing, putting on annual events, putting on educational events for the investors, and amplifying the message that GADC has about all the benefits of being a part of the Greenville business community. This is derived from, paid for by that. So that's a pretty good rundown. I didn't want to take a lot of your time. Mark did a great job. So now let's have a discussion. If you got any questions, and we'll see what they are and maybe respond if we can. Sure, yes, ma'am.
Well, Mr. Walker and then Ms. Mackey.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so we are, as you described in the previous example, an internal department with an EDC committee that makes recommendations to the full council that are then approved, disapproved, or otherwise. One of the things that I believe we lack in that construct is a panel or board of subject matter experts that can vet deals on an independent individual basis.
Yeah. Elevate your voice some, Joe.
One of the things. So what I was saying is one of the things that I feel like we lack in the construct that we have as EDC being a department with a 3 or 4 person committee that then makes recommendations to the council, which is certainly appropriate. But I think one of the things we lose in that construct is a panel, and this is getting to a question, I promise. A panel or board comprised of community stakeholders and subject matter experts that can assist our directors and his or her staff in deal analysis. And is this actually good for the county? or not? And what's the true ROI on this particular opportunity? So the question is, does your board at GADC serve in that capacity, or what is, I mean, maybe, I don't know who the question is for. Who is?
Okay. We have actually a committee on county council, finance committee made up of 5 county council members.
Okay.
And GADC presents to them proposed projects for approval and incentive package, and it's analyzed and then make the staff recommendations. And that committee actually reviews that and makes a decision and passes it out to the full council. So there is a interface there between GADC and county council through our finance committee.
But we use a cost benefit analysis model. So when Fee in Lieu of came rolling around in 1989, I guess, I had been in my position for 2 years. And when I first looked at the legislation, I said, this is going to get me fired.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the analysis that you mentioned is pretty important. So we immediately developed an Excel spreadsheet. It's not rocket science, but it looks at the benefits, certainly, but also the costs. So when we have a new company come in, how many people do they bring? How many kids do we need to educate? How much new roads do we need to build? How many new police do we need to hire? So we do that cost benefit analysis, provide it to council. There's a benchmark, right? So we know we can't go below that without their approval. Now, if, you know, the next Amazon headquarters comes along, we might have to do something special, but we would get approval from our council to do that. But we're the ones that do that. We're the ones that say, this is a valid deal. This is a great company. This is based on their wages, their investment, and you know, their future. You know, what is that going to mean to Greenville County? And as long as they meet that criteria, then the finance committee accepts our recommendation.
Okay.
And one follow-up, the GADC board that we talked about is really at the strategic level. They don't get down into analyzing individual projects.
Right.
Matter of fact, each project has a code name. We don't even know what the company is when Mark presents it to the board meetings. And but Mark and his project managers are subject matter experts, and they're members of the all the economic development organizations. They're very professional. They're continually doing continuing education and upgrading their skills, and that cross-pollination between all these ED professionals around the state and country really comes back and to their ability to really at a high level perform what we want them to perform in Greenville County. So setting that separation from the politicians, and they're over in a separate office building, actually serves us well, that we think.
But we annually, we have 170, I think it's 878 fee deals, fee in lieu of tax deals. Every year we get together, we look at the investment, we track that, we say, are they meeting their requirements? And if they're not, then we have to appeal to council to make those changes. Out of that 170, I think we've done that 3 times in terms of companies not meeting their minimum investment for whatever reason. A lot of times that's beyond anybody's control, but there is a vetting process. Certainly, we're not going to offer incentives to startups that, you know, don't have any
Sometimes you tell them they got to meet their objectives within a 5-year period. And they get up to 5 years and they say, well, this and this happened and we're going to need 2 more years. And they ask for an extension. And then that's evaluated and typically approved because it's infrequent that comes up.
Yeah. But a study that we did showed that more than half the companies invested significantly more than they promised us initially. So not saying we don't have companies go out of business, we do. Knock on wood, we didn't have one go out of business in COVID, which is a phenomenal statistic, I think. And manufacturing, you know, certainly we had restaurants and other things go out of business, but from the fee deals, we didn't have anybody that failed because of COVID. So we were really fortunate.
Thank you. And in that, you answered one of my questions. So you have a robust staff of subject matter experts who do individual deal analysis. I heard that.
Robust is relative. I'm 7.
Always 7. But my follow-up question would be, take a Fox Hill
Yeah.
project, for instance. We recently went through the exercise of the acquisition of a very large parcel, very expensive parcel of land for development as an industrial park. We were leaned on as an EDC committee and ultimately as a whole of council to do a whole lot more macro analytics on that deal itself than I would suggest we necessarily would like to, maybe. So when I ask you the question of who analyzes the deal, when you say the deal gets to the finance committee, is it, the presentation is, yes, the recommendation is, yes, we need to do this deal. This is why, this is the economic impact. Finance committee, we suggest you go find this many dollars somewhere in the budget. And that's how it comes forward, or is it?
Well,
just a quick snapshot of how a Fox Hill deal would come to the finance committee.
I mentioned that county council has some ex officio seats on the board of directors of GADC. So they have a background from Mark's presentations early on about which companies are interested, not by name, but then when we get into what Mark was talking about, the transition that we've gone through from being reactive to proactive in economic development. You know, years ago, we would wait till a company would come in and they would find their location and what they want to do, and then come in and say, we want some incentives or we'll go somewhere else. And we said, well, okay, let's take it or leave it. But now Mark and our board has got us around to Fox Hill example, create product. And in other ways too, create makes it easy for companies to find us and want to be here. So, you know, the creation of Fox Hill and the other enterprise park that we have went through county council, and everybody knows that the product is out there. And now when somebody comes in, a company, and wants to locate there, the background is already laid, the foundation's there. We're meeting the objectives that we agreed upon earlier by this company coming in here. And yes, we're going to do this deal.
But practically, for Fox Hill at least, we had a developer, they bought land, they built buildings, and so we had a tax base. So how we did that deal specifically, we didn't issue bonds. We had some grant dollars. The state of South Carolina helped us with some grants, I'll say that. But what we agreed to with the developer was, you know, on your buildings that you'll own, you pay X amount of taxes, except that now you pay Y amount of taxes, and that goes towards the improvements that you put in. And we monitor that in terms of road construction, publicly dedicated improvements. So roads, water, sewer, things that line a public right of way, we gave them infrastructure credits from that fee in lieu of tax to account for that development. So we didn't issue bonds. We didn't do anything in the sense that we had a exposure. They were investing, and we just gave them back some of that investment to retire debt on whatever improvements were being done.
One challenge I see in Richland County, just kind of standing off and looking, is all the amount of non-revenue producing property. You got state-owned properties, university properties, all acreage taken up, and you know, where's your product going to be? And choices are, but you got to really hunt hard for that. And then the competition with residential development. It's a lot easier to come in and build a subdivision and sell your land for that than it is waiting on that industrial user to come in and buy that land when a family or somebody wants to sell land. And as Mark pointed out, the disparity in taxes is going to have an effect on your ability to provide infrastructure, because that residential subdivision is going to bring in a lot less revenue to the county for infrastructure than the industrial and other types of properties. So you have to figure out a way politically to balance that out and create those differences there. Yes, sir.
Well, I wanted to follow up with Mr. Walker's comment. One area that we struggled a little bit with was like a letter of intent on a piece of real estate. And Mr. Walker is a real estate developer, so I would send it to him and say, what do you think? Ideally, I think what he was getting at with that question was, have a real estate lawyer or a developer or something along those lines on the board to help us vet deals. Is that something that occurs now? Are you intentional about your selection of board members for GADC to bring that type of expertise to the table?
Well, GADC operates under a set of bylaws that address some of those things. And we have a lawyer, council member that, not a member county council, but legal counsel that has a long history working with GADC and is always available to help board members and county council members sort through what the bylaws are and what the mission, those kind of things.
Ms. Mackey?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I want to give you this. I found this in the archives. It was a document I wrote, 2-3 pages, 2013, about the subject we're talking about today. Sure. But I looked at it this morning. I said, I did a pretty good job of that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have brought it, but I want to share it with you in case anybody wants to look at it.
I will be sure to circulate this among the council as
Thank you,
well. But Vice Chair Mackey has a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Just going back to the structure again. So are you a county employee? Are you a contract? And who exactly do you report to? Because I'm sure that's important to keep the timing of things going.
I am, to digress a minute, I'm a 501c3.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are a quasi-public private, we get the tax exemption for our investors based on the C3 status, and a lot of C6s as well. And so that's beneficial. But I am hired and fired by the board. I hire and fire the other staff. So I am administered by the board, of which 3 members of county council sit on. I am an agent of Greenville County. I'm not an employee of Greenville County, but I'm part of the retirement system. The Greenville County is gracious in providing services to us in some parts of administration, including personnel. I'm always appealing to them for help in different areas, but technically I am not a county employee. Having said that, if the county administrator or majority of council wanted me gone, I'd be gone. So they have enough exertion of influence over that organization that I could not do nearly be as productive nor function, frankly, at all without the full support of the county council.
And then you said you had 7 employees?
7 staff members.
7 staff members, and one of those,
Including me. That's, yeah.
one of those was a marketing person?
Yes, I have 3 project managers. Well, I have a vice president who also works projects, but I have 2 senior project managers. I have a research director and an existing industry person, and then an office manager.
And then your marketing person, you said that the investor people give you money and that is your marketing budget?
Not entirely.
Okay.
We spend every dime of that and then some.
Got it.
From the council. So our 80% of my funding comes from Greenville County.
Okay.
So that, if that helps.
On that real quick.
Mr. Walker would like to follow up.
What is the annual funding from council to the GADC?
Pardon?
What is the annual funding from council to GADC?
What did you say, Mark? 1.6?
Well, actually 1.4.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, now here's a qualification. Our organization is provided with some funding as a consequence of the fee in lieu of tax deal. So we get a tiny portion of the county's village, not the school districts or the others, but we have a portion of that fee in lieu of tax revenue that comes back to our organization.
How much comes from investors?
Less than
$150,000.
Yeah, about $150,000, but I was going to say less than a percentage amount, 12%, 13%, whatever that is.
Nobody's twisted their arm either. I mean, these guys want
Just got to stay.
A follow-up. The final decision of any recommendations that you make, does that go back to the full county council or does it go back to the board?
No, it comes from GADC to the finance committee of council, and then the finance committee makes a recommendation to the full council, all council members. To finalize all the deals, come through the full council for final approval.
Okay. And how about how speedy is that in terms of time?
Well, fee in lieu of tax normally requires 3 readings and a public hearing. So you're talking about a 6-week process, maybe. The finance committee, we're in executive session, and we have representatives from the company, and a lot of times the company will bring their attorney. So if there are any questions on behalf of the finance committee about the company or about their process or about the deal, it's asked and answered in that setting. And then assuming that it meets the criteria for the finance committee, they give recommendation to full council, but it still has to be in ordinance format. So 3 readings and a public hearing.
Thank you.
Mr. Livingston?
Thank you very much. And you've answered most of my questions, but can you talk to me a little bit about what your relationship is like with the Upstate Alliance, with the chamber, with the city? How does the cooperation work?
Yeah, all that has been really put together really well, very cooperative, very interchangeable. John Lewis is executive director of Upstate Alliance. He and Mark are good friends. They meet all the time. The chamber has Carlos Phillips's, Mark was actually on their board until just recently for about 8 years on the chamber board. So there's been, everybody has come together. They understand their various roles and resources that they can bring to the table and how they can complement one another and the capabilities that each organization has when put together. And that's the strength of the whole thing.
Do the county still provide funding to the Upstate Alliance, to the chamber, those entities?
Our county is a member of the Upstate Alliance, as are a number of counties and municipalities in the Upstate. And we pay dues for that, yeah.
Director Bill Davis, believe he had a question.
Yeah, I was following up with some of these questions when you were talking about the infrastructure and the spreadsheet that you have. What are some of the metrics that you include in the spreadsheet? Do they include the average salary or the median salary? And the second question of my question is, do you have any maps that show some of these hot points that you're looking for, like a heat map or something on GIS that would show these developable areas? Like when you picked that Fox Hill, how did you go about, like, what were the things and how did you bring that infrastructure to the table?
We were fortunate. We applied for and received a grant from Duke Energy. And so Duke provided us with some funding to hire Global Location as a consulting group in Greenville. Dee Dee Caldwell, Jeff knows her well, but Dee Dee did a search of every parcel. And well, actually we provided her with a shape file because we actually did a lot of that internally. But we came down to 5 parcels of property that would potentially be available next to water, sewer, roads of a certain size, had decent topography. You know, we had a lot of qualifications as a function of that. We came down to 5. Fox Hill was not our first choice, but the family that owned one of the better parcels of property didn't want, they were going to be residential. They were going to sell their property to a home developer, which is fine. A couple of the sites had more challenging issues with infrastructure. Greenville is a great place. We have water lines that stretch from the top of Paris Mountain all the way down to either any corner, but our sewer is limited. And at one time we had 15 separate sewer districts.
Well, we just went through a year or two long battle to consolidate sewer services in the county and provide the capital funds needed to upgrade sewer that was deficient in a lot of places and extend those lines of wastewater treatment. And now that's getting underway, so we expect a real quick improvement in our sewer.
But we have, between Huff Creek and Grove Creek basins, we have pretty comprehensive sewer service. And so that was another qualification of where we could potentially do a lot of this development. So that's, for Greenville County, if you imagine it as a long county, it's kind of the southern part of the center. So it's not really down towards the Greenwood location, but there's the 185 is kind of a bypass, if you will, or 385 and 185 areas are the areas where we have a more comprehensive sewer system, and that kind of limits us because we don't have comprehensive sewer service throughout the county yet.
Did you pay for the out of the GADC, or did that come from the developers?
For the study,
The sewer.
The sewer is paid for by the well, we have 2, thanks to the consolidation effort Butch mentioned, we have 2 major sub-districts now, or we have a major provider, Rewa, And then Metro is the next largest sewer provider. So between those two, they were the ones that were able to, and of course, every deal that we get, we're fortunate enough. A metric that we also use in our organization is grants funding. Last year, we had $1.2 million in grants funding that came to our projects, but we also received some grants funding to provide that sewer service, especially to
REWA, or Renewable Water Resources, is a regional authority created by the state. It covers, it goes outside of Greenville County in places. And their job is to provide all the treatment, wastewater treatment, and put it back in as clean water into the streams and estuaries. The collection goes by Metro Sewer, and there was about 6 or 8 different smaller sub-districts that were responsible for collection in their areas with widely varying levels of service and capital needs and all that. So now all that's being consolidated under Metro. It was a long process, but having one, and they work well with REWA, so you can access a lot more maybe federal funds to come in for those kind of purposes than we could have before, now that we've got a unified effort in sewer.
Councilwoman Newton and then Councilman Livingston.
Thank you. And you addressed part of this question with Councilwoman Mackey's question about the marketing staff that you have. But I'm just curious to know if you can talk a little about, from a process perspective, what you guys do to market the region so that you're attracting more industry here.
Yeah, certainly on a regional basis, that is the function of the Upstate Alliance. So the Upstate Alliance, they just released their calendar of events. They have trade shows and marketing missions and that kind of thing. Their job is to find the animal. Our job is to club it and pin it. So they don't work projects. I think it's a little different with the Central Carolina Alliance, but they don't work projects. They basically provide information to us, and I say us being the 10 counties, and then we're the ones that do that. Now, internally, we do some marketing, and that's focused on digital. So we don't do any Plant Sites and Parks magazines. We don't do any, that old traditional kind of marketing. Everything we focus on is our website. So we developed a, as labor resources became tight, we developed a job site or a website called Jobs in Greenville. And so if anybody's interested in jobs, we work with, as we have announcements, we place those jobs on that jobs board for that company. And then hopefully a potentially interested person would contact that company and would fill out the application. So we focus everything that we do more internally in terms of marketing. We each of us, each of my project managers and myself, we do one marketing trip a year that we generate. One goes to Dallas. I go to Charlotte because I've worked there most of my career. Tony goes to Dallas. Tony goes to Washington and the Northeast. Kevin goes to Atlanta. So we each adopt a market kind of where we have a proactive marketing mission to lead it. But a lot of times we're participating in those with the Upstate Alliance. But they are the ones that have the responsibility primarily for marketing the region. And then and Greenville is just the center of no offense to Spartanburg and Anderson, but people like Greenville. So
the biggest marketing asset is our existing companies that are already.
That's true. And we use them as well. They'll refer companies to us and give us opportunities.
And I don't want to make you speak for the city, but when you say that you use the Upstate Alliance to really market the region, generally speaking, does the city take that same approach where everyone is collectively as a team saying, we are having the Upstate Alliance do this?
No, because the city just announced a new marketing campaign aimed at entrepreneurial and innovation. So entrepreneurship and IT and that kind of thing that's kind of where they've said, we're going to put a stake in the ground in this area. So a manufacturer wouldn't necessarily be in Greenville, the city of.
Okay.
Number one, there's not a lot of availability for sites. All old textile mills are being turned into residential. Everybody wants to live in an old textile mill now, it seems. So all these, facilities are being redeveloped for residential. But But the city the city of Greenville doesn't have a lot of manufacturing sites regardless. But the city of Greenville has focused on IT and entrepreneurial kind of activity. So they have a marketing program aimed specifically at that.
Thank you.
Mr. Livingston.
One quick question, Chair. Having spoken with Jeff and others about your model over the years, one of the things that stood out to me was looking at those things that you could do to give you more flexibility and allow you to deal with more challenges by having a 501c3. Can you talk a little bit about what some of that flexibility and advantage you have being a 501c3 as opposed to a governmental entity?
Sure. So I worked most of my career for York County, and I was a county department. Technically, I couldn't buy alcohol. Okay, so when I took the prospect to dinner, I would tell the waiter, just consolidate everything. Don't give me an item on my bill because I don't want to submit that. But that was a restriction based on that county policy. So it was not debilitating, but it was difficult sometimes. I couldn't buy a roll of tape without going through county purchasing procedures. I couldn't do some of the things that required. You got to remember that our client in economic development is not Joe Citizen. Most of the things counties are set up for are designed to get a permit to somebody or to get a service to somebody. It's a citizen who you're dealing with. Us, it's companies, it's private individuals, it's private groups. So that flexibility in a 501c3 allows me, it's not like we're not responsible. I consider the fact that we spend a lot of county dollars, we're very above board with everything that we do. Any expenditures can be reviewed. It's not like it's not like it gives us an opportunity to do something behind the scenes. But it does give us some flexibility that you just don't have in a traditional county department.
Let me add this.
Yeah, when I asked that question, the alcohol thing was my why I like the model or whatever.
on GDC's budget, matter of fact, county auditor, who's a CPA, is a member of their board.
A standing member of our board. He's got a position that is written into the bylaws. So the auditor for Greenville County is a standing member of my board and serves on the finance committee as well.
Mr. Rubel.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to steal any thunder, but I do want to relay the importance of that. So we talk about flexibility, speed. Give you a specific example. Samsung, before they went to Newberry, was specifically interested in a facility in Richland County. They asked for some borings in the facility to see how the floor could hold their machinery equipment. I had to go through a procurement process, and we never did get the borings done. By that time, they had to move to a new facility in another county. That procurement process is there for a good reason. I'm not arguing with it, but it just doesn't work when we're trying to move at the speed of the company. So that's a specific example of why you want that flexibility and speed.
Sure. And I have a question. It was mentioned earlier, can't remember which one of you mentioned it, but that your existing industries have served as, I guess, an asset in attracting new economic development. But I also understand that Greenville has, I guess your airport is international. Has that also been, I guess, an asset, or is that something you all have been able to, I guess, pitch, if you will, when you're trying to recruit or attract new investment?
Yeah, I love my airport. I have to say, Dave Edwards and they do a tremendous job, but we only have a couple of dozen direct flights. And for office and corporate headquarters, that's an issue. So if you're trying to attract a corporate headquarters and all those C-level people are having to change planes in Nashville or Dallas or wherever, it becomes an issue for them. It really does. Having said that, Greenville GSB goes to every city on the East Coast that we really work with, or at least in close proximity. They go as far west as Denver, Dallas, but we need to be further west, right? We need to be San Francisco, LA. We need a West Coast flight. The airport is a tremendous asset to us, and it's certainly something that we appreciate, but we sit between the #1 airport in the world and the number 6 airport in the nation in Charlotte and Atlanta. So Charlotte is the number 6 airport in the nation in terms of flights. They have over 750 daily flights, and Atlanta's number 1 in the world. So we'll never have that concentration of direct flights in Greenville. Having said that, we're adding them every day. I just added one the other day to Baltimore. I can't remember where it was. Anyway, so a lot of people underestimate the value of a great airport. Charleston has done the best job in South Carolina of adding flights. We do have an international flight. Senator Aviation goes to Munich, I think, but that's primarily cargo. So we don't have any passenger daily internationals. And Charleston has added one to Seattle and then one to, where does Charleston go internationally? They go to Gatwick.
I believe it's London. I believe it's
London. Yeah.
I think it's London.
So they're doing a great job. We're doing a good job as well. But a lot of people underestimate the value of a good airport, and it's certainly been the reason Charlotte, has grown at the speed of light in terms of new corporate headquarters and office jobs.
Any additional questions? Director Rubel?
I just wanted to point one thing out. Mark and I are very good friends. We actually fish together. We're somewhat competitive. He threw up their best slide, their slide, the best year ever was 631 million. Is that right?
Yeah.
Same year we did 638.
And I'll say this in parting, and it's no offense against Richland County, and I'd say this if Jeff wasn't in the room. I never worried about Richland until recently. So I worried about Anderson, Spartanburg, Aiken even. Charleston got a real surge in the last couple of decades for manufacturing. I never had to worry about Richland until lately.
Well, thank you.
Director Davis, and then we'll.
I got a lot of questions, but I'm gonna call them down.
I'll be glad to get on a phone call.
Let's check out.
The spec buildings, I know, I'm familiar with the process of those tilt-up buildings, and they've come together pretty quickly and they're fairly open. Does the developer make all those decisions, or do you influence the decision as to what the type of building is?
We are, it's interesting. That's a very good question. Developers come to us now and they have a tranche of money. They don't have the building size, ceiling height, floor thickness. They don't have any of that in mind. They got to spend $30 million. So they're building, and 400,000 square feet is not our sweet spot. Our sweet spot is manufacturing, and it's 150,000 square feet, and it's international. But the last several spec buildings that have been built have been at least 250 and up. So we keep statistics about most requested. So every time a company calls us and says, I need this, and this, we write it down, we track that, and we report that on an annual basis to the whole real estate community. And when they talk to us, we say, well, what we really need is this. But actually what happens is they say, well, I got to spend this much money, so I want to build this size building. And it's really, it's worked out because we've seen some bigger projects, but I would love to have some smaller manufacturing-based type buildings, and they're building larger multi-purpose kind of facilities that they feel are going to cover a bigger waterfront than just manufacturing. So they don't pour a thicker floor, or they don't raise the ceiling height, or they don't, they add a bunch of truck doors thinking it's going to be distribution as opposed to manufacturing. But we try to influence that decision. But regardless, we're happy that we've got these buildings, and we'll take anything we can get. But they seem to have a different set of criteria when they come to us about, our statistics say we got to do this. And so that's what normally happens.
So you're going to build an inventory list. That's probably what you have, an inventory list. You go to that list and say, this one fits that.
Right. And I say, I would love to see you build this type of, 32-foot ceiling height, 40 by 50 base basin, drive-in doors, dock level door. And I've done it to all these groups. And I say that we actually have had a couple built like that, but but their mindset is a little different in terms of what they want to build or what they think their product should be. And in some cases, we've subdivided some of those larger buildings. TPA is a good example. They're out of Atlanta. They come in and they build 300,000 square feet. They don't care, what the market is. That's their model, 300,000 square feet. It's like a cookie cutter type thing that they do all over, and they've been successful. And now we've had, to subdivide some of their buildings. But yeah, so we track that, and we certainly try to influence that. At the end of the day, we're just grateful they're doing anything, because 5 years ago we had zero.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you all.
Thank you for your time.
Sure, I do it. So certainly just want to thank you all for coming in and sharing that information with us. We appreciate that. And we have enjoyed ourselves here in Greenville. I think I can say that. But we really appreciate this particular moment working with us as we actually work towards part of our strategic plan and looking at some of these potential opportunities for Richland County. So thank you all again. I appreciate it.
And Mr. Brown,
I'm honored that you invited us, and we're glad you came to Greenville. Are y'all leaving today, or?
some of us are.
You can just say yes.
And I just want to say on behalf of the council, thank you for coming and sharing all of your secrets.
Well, we're all in this together in South Carolina. Great state. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you. Y'all have a great trip home.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, it's a few minutes before lunch, but I want to remind you, if you were checking out this afternoon, the checkout time is noon. So I want to remind you about that in case we're checking out. All right, so after this, we're pretty much done with this session. We're going to go to lunch. Lunch is going to be an hour, so not an hour and a half. We'll come back. The last portion of this is going to be my financial arm. Then that will conclude this year's retreat. All right, enjoy your lunch.
All right.
Yes. I will touch you. Are you walking or driving?
No, I'm driving. I
don't know about that.
It's probably too far for me to walk.
Everybody back to our afternoon session. This afternoon session is going to give us a financial look at the county. Call up our Assistant County Administrator, Lori Thomas, who oversees our financial arm of Richland County government. Ms. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Brown, and council members, thank you for allowing us to indulge you for just a little bit. I promise I know that I'm the last thing
Many of us.
for you getting on the road and that you just had lunch.
No, no,
So
no.
we can make this as quick as
This
you
is
like.
important.
That would be just fine with me. It has been a year, a little over a year since I joined Richland. And I've got to say that I have truly enjoyed the time that I've spent here thus far. I feel like we are doing some great things, and I've made this comment to many people, and I'm not just saying it because I felt like I should, but I have never seen a council that works so hard for their citizens. I've been involved in a lot of governments, and this council is very active, and I've said that to numerous people. So I'd like to say thank you.
One, two.
Let's see here. I think you're just queuing up my PowerPoint now. And unfortunately, we don't have a remote, so they're going to be driving this for me. Well, while they're doing that, I know what the first thing on my agenda is, and that is, as you know, back in October, we lost Budget Director James Hayes when he went to be with family in the Pennsylvania area. And since that time, we were undergoing a search for a budget director to lead that charge and to also take us to the next level of budgeting as we move toward a strategic plan and implementing performance-based budget. On January the 18th, which was a week ago this past Monday, our new budget director joined us. His name is Abi Deshpande. And there's nothing like throwing them to the wolves. So I'm going to ask Abi if he would come forward and introduce himself and tell them a little bit about himself. Abi?
Thank you, Laurie. Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and the member of the council, it's my pleasure to join the county and honor as well. Definitely since yesterday, I really appreciated all the opportunities that I had and interactions that I had with all of you and also my colleagues. Definitely, let me start with I know that there has been some difficulty about saying my name. So, my full name is Abhijit Deshpande, but I also go with Abi, which is my mom still calls me Abi. So I'm totally comfortable if you want to address me as Abi, that's totally fine with me. My last name is Deshpande, so it's like a Deshpande, like a Sunday, Monday, like days. Like so, I hope, and you just need to practice like a few dozen times and you will get it. But as I said, I was with the state government, and when I decided to leave the state government and come to the county government, my well-wishers and my friends, they gave me a lot of blessings and they wished me a lot of lucks. But I always truly believe that, actually the local and county government has way more than opportunities to improve and influence the local communities and the citizens' life. And I truly believe that, and hence, my aim was to be in the local and county government, and hence I purposefully decided to pursue this opportunity. Definitely, I was very glad to, just to learn about how the county is committed towards, strategic planning, linking that to the budgeting priorities or strategic priorities to the budgeting. We talked about performance-based budgeting. We talked about, having that good governance, and that is what I'm passionate about and I have been doing for the last 8 years. So just to give a quick and very quick skinny about what I have been doing last around 8-9 years with the state government. I started with the governor's executive budget office, and that's where I ran as a performance improvement manager. And that was a kind of state of South Carolina's flagship performance-based budgeting program. And definitely, I take great pride in terms of, the instituting that program in the state, kind of taking forward from where I got it. So I did that for 4 years. And then most recently, I was with the Department of LLR, which is Labor Licensing and Regulation. And I served there as their CFO and the Chief Procurement Officer in last 4 years. But definitely, when I saw this opportunity, as I mentioned, that I was so interested to come in with the state, local and county government, and I just decided to take a shot at it. But I'm glad that I made that decision. I'm very happy to see, as Laurie mentioned, the active council, and which I actually evidenced that in the last 2 days. So definitely, I look forward to working with all of you. Definitely, hopefully, I will be able to make that contribution that you wanted and at your service.
Thank you.
Yes, that's right. That was for me. Okay, got it.
So last year, I stood in this very similar situation, only in a different location. And I started talking with you about some of the considerations that I felt were important to just share with you a little bit about my thoughts on governmental budgeting. And one of those considerations, if you recall, was that we wanted to move toward balancing our budgets, our budgeted type expenditures, so recurring expenditures to cover recurring, covered by recurring budgeted dollars. And not using non-recurring dollars to cover recurring expenditures, because that just digs you into a very deep hole. And we've worked toward those things in the past year, and we talked about those a lot going through last year's budget, and we'll be doing the same things going into the following year's budget. What I can promise you, though, is you're going to see this slide and a few more that you're going to recognize from last year that you saw a lot. I won't be showing those anymore. You go to the next slide, please. So the next 3 slides, and actually the 3 following that, are going to give you an idea of how we're doing for fiscal year 2022. And this is actually going to compare it to budget. These are all in your workbook. I believe this starts on page 5 of my presentation. And it will give you an overview of how each department is doing as of November 30 in relation to their budget. Keep in mind that by that time of the year, you've gone through 41.6% of your annual year. And so your budget, while not always applicable, should be somewhere close to that. We only have a couple of departments that are above that. And those are relatively explainable. One, the most notable being budget and elections, because most of their costs come in the first half of the year. With the elections happening at that time. Go on down to the next slide, please. It's not. Can I? This is the second page of this, and as you see at the bottom of that page, we're in the 30% range for general budget expenditures year to date compared to budget. You go to the next slide, please. Hit enter.
Circle.
It's shifted back again. I'm sorry. So just hit number 8, please.
Populating, whatever it's called.
I believe each of you has this in your book, so perhaps if you have any questions related to that, I'll just open it up. Those, I believe, go through page 16. The first is your general fund. The second, and those are relatively important to us simply because those are the largest fund that we have, where we actually pay most of the county's operating bills from. Following that is your special revenues. Special revenues are not as concerning because typically they actually have a revenue source that is attached to those. Some of those are your victims assistance, your hospitality taxes, those kinds of things. And while we do make some transfers from the general fund into a few of those, most of your special revenue funds will have support from some other outside source. I think they should be on page 13 is where your special revenues would start, if I'm not mistaken. So as a recap from there, when I compare year-to-date expenses this year to year-to-date expenses last year, we are very much on par. The numbers are very close, very similar. As a matter of fact, it's within less than $50,000. So that's very much a positive. When I look at revenues, the revenues are about $6 million year-to-date, less than that. But keep in mind that the largest portion of your revenues from a county perspective actually don't come in until late December, January, when all of your personal property taxes are actually being paid.
That again, Ms. Thomas, about the, you said the majority of the revenue that comes in. Repeat that one more time.
The majority of your general fund revenue actually comes in late December and January. Think about your escrow for your property taxes, like your mortgages and such. Those are all paid from those escrow accounts in late December, early January. So we don't actually see those hit our financials until that time of year. I did ask for some preliminary numbers, and we are looking very strong in late December. We don't have finals yet. And another strong point for us this year is we also get our local option sales tax on a quarterly basis, and that is looking very strong for 2022. It was exceptionally strong for 2021. But there's a lot of money out in the market right now, and money is inexpensive. So a lot of people are spending a lot of money. So while we're optimistic about those things, we also want to be cautious as we move forward in planning, because those are the most volatile types of taxes as things change economically. Any questions? Could I ask you to go down? Just go down the slides, please. I do need to get to these. I apologize for this. Number 21, please. Page 21 of my report, this actually shows our tax collection perspective as of November 2021. You'll notice there we collected about $6 million more in tax revenues this year than we did last. At the same time, you'll notice that there's a credit in fee in lieu of. However, it's not uncommon for us to pay back credits periodically during the year as things will be realigned, or some taxes will be, some industries may claim some things as fee loads when they should actually be property taxes. It's just a budget, it's just a journal entry, and that has actually corrected itself as we've moved forward beyond these times. General fund taxes are also looking strong, and as I said, local option sales tax, you notice there, that's about $1.5 million more than it was at the same time last year. And that's a very strong indicator. That actually also helps our residents and continues to maintain lower property tax rates for our citizens. Any questions related to that?
Mr. Malinowski has his hand up. You recognize Mr. Malinowski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Thomas, in any of these figures here, which I did not look at in detail, is the local government fund listed anywhere?
Not specifically, no, sir. And we actually won't see that, see most of that money hit us until first quarter of 22. So no, sir, they're not there yet.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask you to go to the next slide, please? It would be page 22 in your presentation. We're giving you a snapshot of the outstanding debt for Richland County. A lot of you have asked us about what our capacity for borrowing is and what our debt service is. This is broken down by multiple components. The first two are actually general fund debt, with the exception of the Richland County Library. The Richland County Library falls into the same type of debt as ours because it is general obligation, but we are not obligated to pay those debts. So in the calculation that I will show you, it will be excluded. The rest of the debt is broken down by enterprise fund.
Ms. Thomas, someone.
I'm sorry.
We do pay the library debt, it's just the referendum debt.
Or millage.
It doesn't apply to the 8% because it's a referendum debt. But we do pay it.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So it is paid, but it's already obligated and specifically identified for that. The enterprise funds, keep in mind that those debts are covered by service fees. And so that debt is not applicable to our general fund, with the exception of the 2021 refunding. If you'll recall, this is a sewer project funded that was funded out of the general obligation because at the time the sewer system would not qualify for enterprise debt. As long, however, as the sewer system can cover that debt, we do not have to pay that from the general fund. It is sourced from the enterprise funds. Following that, we have the IPRB, which is for the property that we have out in Blythewood. Then you have our hospitality tax debt, which is funded specifically with hospitality tax. And lastly, the transportation fund debt, which is covered by our transportation penny. So none of that will apply to our 8% debt limit, which by state law, we can't have more than 8% of our assessed value in debt without a referendum. Can I get you to go to the next one? So here's our legal debt calculation. Our assessed value is $8 billion roughly, which makes it possible for us to have about $144 million in debt. Our amount that's applicable to that is $94.7 million. We actually, what's excluded there is your referendum debt, which leaves us a net applicable to debt limit of another $46.6 million of a legal debt margin of 96.993. So we can actually borrow about an additional $100 million almost. Keep in mind, we've already committed this coming year that we will borrow up to $40 million to fund our public safety complex. And we are working to get that debt issue done as quickly as possible because there are economic indicators that we could be looking at up to 4 interest rate increases this year, with the first coming probably sometime in late March. The next 4 or 5 slides, I'll ask you to go down with me. Right there. You will recall, these are the slides that I promise you won't see again. This is just talking about sustainable budgeting, how important that is. And that is that we borrow, or that we plan our budget to be paid from the collections that we have within the year in which we have. Historically, we've done our budgeting based on some using fund balance. But we have to be very cognizant that as long as we continue to do that, that does weigh on our financial capabilities. So we will be, we are making sure that we apply all necessary policies there, and that we will be making you aware of where those percentages come in at the end of each cycle with relation to fund balance policy. We'll go on down. I'll skip these slides because I think that they can look good in themselves. And you go to the projections right there. Slide number 31. This is a slide I did for you guys last year as well. I've just moved out 1 year. And it shows some year-to-date results. Now, at the time of the printing of this, FY21 was asterisk as a unaudited. We have now completed our annual comprehensive financial report. It has been filed with the Comptroller General and the General Accounting Office, sorry. And it has also been filed with GFOA for the Financial Reporting Award. So we do, these numbers are solidified at this point in time. What you will notice though is that in every year we budget to use fund balance to balance our budget. Last year I said that we had only exercised that option 1 year, which meant we spent less than we actually planned to spend. However, this past year we did have to dip into our fund balance. And I'd like to explain that to you at this point. We had actually budgeted last year to spend $7.6 million of fund balance to balance our budget. We actually spent 5.5. However, our revenues were stronger than they had ever been. We actually had, with transfers in and one-time money, we actually had about $190 million in coming in. I take that back. $185 million coming in. We had to balance with $5.5 million from the fund balance. When our auditors began reviewing the document that was produced by the South Carolina Department of Revenue for us to actually repay ourselves to the transportation budget, because we are a related party, we were required to recognize that entire expense. We did not have to transfer all of the cash, but we did have to recognize the entire expense, which then makes that entire $15.3 million unavailable in the general fund balance. So that took a large hit on what was our unassigned fund balance. So that's something that we have to be cognizant of as we move forward. Can you go to the next slide, please? For our historical projected revenues, you'll notice that we have, that this past year was our strongest revenue year ever. A lot of that had to do with some one-time money that was from the CARES Act and other COVID-related projects or grants. The other was from the extremely successful local option sales tax credit. And our property taxes were also very strong. With that, for the coming year, we're budgeting revenues at approximately $183 million. And my first estimate for FY23 is about $187.5 million. And you said, well, you know, you took in 190 last year. What's the big difference? Well, again, $5.5 million was that what came out of our fund balance. And we know that about almost $2 million I can identify as one-time source credit revenues that we will not see again, unless there is some other program that might be instituted. So my first estimate at this point is $187 million roughly in revenues. You go to the next slide, please. This shows you our historical use of fund balance. Again, as I said, we've only called on our fund balance twice in recent history. Once was a very minor amount back in 2019. And then this year, when we actually had to satisfy the debt that we had to our own sales and our transportation department. Now, the good news about that is this was probably the best year that we could have had to have recognized that because our revenues were so strong. But with the revenue projections, I also want to be very conservative because of the fact that we still are operating in the midst of a pandemic. We are now hearing that the federal government may begin to pull back what has been propping up the low interest rates, which has also been driving high property values. So we could see our property values stall for new properties coming onto the tax rolls. And additionally, we may see our interest rates go up. And with that, individuals may reconsider some of their spending as well. Does anyone have any questions related to that? Yes.
What interest rate are you borrowing at now?
It really depends. I think on the last basis, the last one we did on one of the refundings was, and it was not a typical refunding. It was the refunding out at Sandhills, and it was in the neighborhood of about 3%. And I believe the 2021 sewer referendum was under 3%. We had actually hoped to wait a little bit farther in the process of the public safety complex. However, I'm working with our financial advisor right now to actually go ahead and start pulling those documents together so that we could actually issue that debt. It may be my recommendation once you consider what I'll bring to the table is to go ahead and borrow the full 40 million at the lower interest rate that we can. And if it's not all used, we can always reallocate it for an additional capital project. But name it as, we could even think about potential capital projects if we may want to use it. But that would be a 20-year debt. And also we may look at whether it's going to go 20 or 30 years, depending on the allocation of the payments. Other questions?
With our fund,
Yeah, Ms. McBride.
with the fund balance, we generally keep 25%.
Our financial policy states that we keep between 20 and 35% of prior year expenditures. So to keep in mind as where our low end of that is, it should be somewhere between 1.6 and 1.7% per percentage. So we should be somewhere in the range of 32 to 35 million on the low end of unassigned and 56 to 60 on the high end.
And historically, in doing it, we've done well in terms of rating and everything.
We've typically been in the 25 to 28% ratio. Right now, we're at about 24.8. If we spend what we have budgeted for FY22, we will be at about 22%, which is going to leave us a very low tolerance going into FY23.
But we still will be, and I forgot the acronym, GDF, whatever it is.
GFOA's best practice.
So we will still be within that range.
As long as we stick to budget. Yes, ma'am. Other questions? Thank you all for your time. We'll be working with you on the budget process soon. And thank you again for having us here in Greenville.
I just want to say thank you all. Certainly want you to be safe. For those of you who are traveling back, this does conclude our retreat. Certainly want to ask Chair, Vice Chair, if you have any concluding remarks that you would like to make. Other than that, as I exit the podium as the County Administrator, thank you for your presence. Thank you for your participation. And we certainly look forward to the fruits of the labor you provided on today and on yesterday. I believe there are no additional remarks, so consider this meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Great meeting.
He's out of here.
I had to vote on it.